I'm glad to be here, and a big thank you to BTC Shapiro for organizing like this conference. So what I will be talking about is related to my research in the area and my PhD thesis. In the autism rights movement, there have been like certain activists who have talked about efforts in the field when it comes to certain therapies and also like assimilation of autistic persons, and whether or not such a form of silencing or elimination of this condition would lead to a form of genocide, as was mentioned by certain authors. Now, I know that genocide is obviously a big word, but the whole point of this presentation is to give an overview of the situation and to point to certain red flags which we might be looking at if we are not like very careful with the words we use and the actions we undertake. So, I will look in this presentation, first of all, at why certain activists have used the word genocide and why it can actually like have different meaning to what we're usually used to. Then I'll look at the search for the autism gene, the autism genome project, and how this ties into this. I will look at current and future initiatives in the field that are being undertaken by legislators and certain warnings that have also come from bodies such as the United Nations. And then we'll look at what happened and whether history like could repeat itself. So first of all, I'll very briefly go over the concept of genocide. Many people obviously think of horrible events in history that happened, such as like the Holocaust or the Rwandan genocide, so we'll think mainly of actually the killing of persons. However, there are a number of other factors which are also mentioned by the United Nations, including, for example, measures intended to prevent births, so issues like such as sterilization would come here, also forcibly transferring children to another group. That could also have a link with guardianship issues, for example, when it comes to disability and specifically autism. So the UN Convention does not cover disability when it comes to this issue because it mentions a number of protected groups. However, history has shown us that specific groups have been left out of the convention, for example, political groups, just because of political reasons. So a number of authors have said that even though the convention sticks to a specific number of groups, this does not mean that whatever happens, whatever negative actions happen towards certain groups do not constitute any crimes along these lines. In fact, the United Nations, before adopting the convention, had talked specifically about the denial of the right of existence in any form of entire human groups. And it also specified that this is not just on racial, political or religious grounds, but also on any other grounds. So certain authors, such as Peter Drost or Israel Charney, have also specifically said that the concept can be increased to include disability. In fact, you have other authors, Helen Fine, John Thompson, Gail Quetz, have mentioned that if you have a series of purposeful actions that try to destroy collectivity or to limit it in a certain way, we are also going down the same road. It's basically about these restrictions and the purposive action in question. Now, coming to the Autism Genome Project, how does this tie in? So first of all, I'm sure that most of you are aware of this, but we can already see from this poster here in question the use of certain terminology. How are we talking about autism? Nature magazine had mentioned that autism was a disease in vitro. If we're using certain terminology, such as disease, we are already putting red flags to the issue. So the project itself uses certain terminology. We're looking at susceptibility. We're looking at prevention of the issue. So before even considering autism, or considering, for example, what efforts can we make to include persons who are autistic, or else to actually provide better services. We're already thinking of, okay, there's an autism gene, this might actually lead to autism, there are all of these problems, how can we prevent things, how can we actually make sure that this horrible disease doesn't happen? In any case, medically, autism would never be classified as a disease. So the legal basis for this, since it is mainly an EU initiated project, is also a bit suspect, because the article of European law under which the Autism Genome Project is authorized actually deals with public health and it also deals specifically with fighting major health scourges. Now, if we are using this kind of terminology, like what impression does it give to persons about autism, especially persons who are not very familiar with this? If we're looking at things such as epidemiology, calling autism an epidemic, and also like promoting research into like transmission, prevention, this is like what the law is. Like the law is obviously like designed for other conditions, but if we're actually putting autism into the same basket, we're raising red flags which are unnecessary. Now, there are a number of also other initiatives as regards like the autism gene. So the Autism Genome Project is the biggest one. However, there was some other research and the things are going like into murky waters. For example, 2013, the Autism Center of Excellence at the University of California, San Diego said it had actually identified an autism signature in babies as young as 12 months, and they said they would develop a simple blood test to detect this. But what is the reason of this? Are we actually trying to have like early warning signs in order to be able to provide better services for autistic kids and autistic adults down the line? Or are we trying to find a way of identifying these persons and trying to have ways of terminating pregnancies before they are born, as happened like with Down syndrome, like in many countries? Also, the state of Western Australia was very excited about these developments, and they decided to start a program of PGD screening, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. So just as with the case of Down syndrome, they wanted to have something similar. It's already implemented in the case of autism. The problem is that with Down syndrome, you would have a specific chromosome. With autism, obviously, there's no specific marker as such. So the method they are using is, they're saying, okay, so the CDC statistics in the United States say it's 4 times more likely that a boy might have autism than a girl. So if there's prevalence in the family, we'll actually choose to implant female embryos instead of male embryos. Now, this leads to a lot of ethical issues. In countries like India, we talk about femicides. So if there's like prenatal screening, many people actually still like choose to have an abortion if the fetus is female and not male. So why is it bad in this situation, but why did it get the green light in Western Australia, and why is nobody speaking about that? And in the UK also, although it was not implemented, they're also like looking at this. So we've got the Fertilization and Embryology Act, and it is for highly heritable and life-threatening disorders. But still, autism is listed as a genetic condition awaiting consideration. So still, why are we putting it in the same basket, and what are the implications for this? There are also like other possible problems in the sense that like with the Netherlands, you've got like what's called the Groningen Protocol, which is basic legislation allowing for termination of life postnatally if the child will have unbearable suffering due to his disease. It hasn't been used till now in the case of autism, but legislation is pretty open. And also Belgium has legalized euthanasia in the case of children, but obviously the consent is given by parents. So if we do not really make things watertight, how will we know actually how far we are going to go? Now, as regards the United Nations, specifically in the issue of like abortion as regards like disabilities, there was the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In the report on Spain, it mentioned a very specific point. They're not talking about the right to abortion, but many countries actually have in their laws, even if they do not allow abortion in general, that disability can be a ground for abortion. And the committee criticized Spain for having this in its law, because you have time limits up to 14 weeks in case of an abortion in general, but actually you have more time in case like there is a disability. So the committee actually like, asked for answers as regards Spain, from Spain in case of like serious anomalies in the fetus or else serious and incurable illness, because the terms are quite wide open. And what Spain actually said, okay, you know, it will just be certified by 2 medical professionals, it's fine. So it is it is all in the hands of like medical professionals to decide whether you will live or not. And it also said, but you know, like our main concern is actually fetal anomalies incompatible with life. And they just said this because they just don't want to extend disability benefits to hypothetically disabled unborn fetuses. But still, the main issue is this. Look at the language being used. Like in 2010s, we were using the term incompatible with life. There was a similar term used in the 1930s, life and the worthy of life, by Nazi psychiatrist Alfred Hoche, who referred to these persons as human ballast. So are we still using the same kind of like terminology, and where will this actually lead to? So just like showing like a number of legislation about the protection of the human genome and like making sure that like eugenics like does not come into the picture. There is a number of like legislation in place. The problem is this: are we actually respecting this or not? So I'll just like close very quickly with the 8 stages of genocide, or like any like things down the line. So this is Professor Gregory Stanton from Yale University, and I will just like compare very quickly like what happened in the case of ethnicity, which he gave the example of, and like what might happen like in the case of disabilities if you are not careful. So we've got these 8 stages. It's about like having an us and them comparison, the way he puts it. So we're polarizing, we're telling people this is good, this is bad, let's find a way of dealing with the problem, and we all like know what happened in the past. So in the case of autism, if you're actually like putting like these labels on people, unless we actually like change mentality, unless we actually like try to push for new mentalities, as long as we keep on seeing autism as the enemy, we have no idea how far like things will go. There's a lot of red flags. We have to be careful in our approach, just to like make sure that we don't go down the same road. Thank you.